Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Lieutenant JG Aaron Abreu. Welcome to video number 4, episode number 4 for our Medical Service Corps in Procurement program. As promised, we are here today to talk about CO recommendations, and we have two amazing guest speakers today that will be answering the questions that we posed to everybody in the Facebook group. So if you have additional questions, I'll try to read it in the comments, but I think we have a pretty good number of questions that was submitted to the Facebook group. So before we begin, I want to introduce the two guests that we have. First is we have Commander Scory. She's been in for about 22 years. Ma'am, let me know if that was wrong once I unmute you. She was a prior corpsman, actually, and then she got out and then commissioned. She has various duty stations and very heavy on the Fleet Marine Force platform, as now she's an executive assistant for the deputy of DHA. And that's Commander Scory, and she'll be speaking with us today about CO recommendations, as she was my prior executive officer, so she was able to be behind the scenes, or actually right beside Captain Boyce with these type of things. And speaking of Captain Boyce, he is our second guest. I know he's a very busy man. If you don't know his name and you're trying to get into MSC community, hopefully you are reading the rudder. That name should sound familiar, as he is the Deputy MC for our Medical Service Corps. He's been in for about 25 years, EHO by trade, Environmental Health Officer. And he's here to speak. And he was my prior CO at 2nd Medical Battalion, and he has various platforms as well, from PERS overseas, Fleet Marine Force, the hospital, so the whole gamut. So very knowledgeable, and very thankful that we have the two of you here today. Sir, ma'am, thank you so much for your time. So without further ado, I'm just going to go right into the questions, sir, ma'am, and feel free to go back and forth between yourselves, and we'll end on a advice for the group after we've gone through all the questions. All right, let me just unmute your mics. Oh, I think you guys have to unmute it. I'm sorry. There you go. Awesome. So first question, and this is from one of our service members. Do COs prefer to provide their own letter or write their own letter of recommendation, or should the applicant provide their own CO's draft?
So I'm going to yield this to Commander Scory first, and let her answer. Then I'll give you my opinion on my recommendations. Okay. So Beth, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think probably it depends on the CO, but I would err on the side of providing a draft. It's always easier to edit something than it is to open up a blank Word document and start typing. And, you know, there's certain things that your CO might want to know about you. So you can give them some background in the draft that you provide them, and then they can edit it to how they write letters, or, you know, and add in their own flavor. But I would recommend at least offering up a version, because COs are busy people, and opening up and starting from scratch is probably not something that most of them would prefer to do. And that's what I would advise when I was an XO.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Hey, great answer. Yeah, you're making, I'll let you go first because you make my job easier. Still in XO mode. Yeah, I definitely concur with that. I typically always advise people. I let them know right up front, but it's going to vary per CO. So it's always, if they don't specifically tell you how they want to do it, then I would always ask. And typically, you know, if you're asking someone to do a letter of recommendation for you, then you should feel comfortable asking them how they want it drafted.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Thank you, ma'am. Since we're on the topic of like COs of drafts, individuals were asking, is there any specific items they need to focus on when they're writing the CO recommendation? Majority of the applicants, as we all know, are enlisted, so they're used to writing evals and SOQ packages. Is there any type of like flavor or flow that's going to be different when they're trying to draft a CO recommendation?
I mean, I would say that you're trying to become an officer. So your recommendation should speak to traits that would make you a good officer. So leadership, education, where you've, kind of consistently ranked, you've been a top performer or sustained superior performance, those types of things, are important. Maybe like all the volunteer work you did is great for your eval, but that's not necessarily what makes you a characteristic that makes you a desirable officer candidate. That would be my input.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir,
Yeah, again, I concur with that. I think focusing on leadership and also really focusing on the mission. One of the things I always tell people is what is our mission in Navy medicine, and what are we doing, and how are you going to contribute to that mission in the future? I think those are things that will give you some good talking points and will help focus the letter and guide whoever's doing your letter recommendation. Also, too, those are really good bullet points that you want to talk to, that will be good talking points for the board, and will make a significant impact on when they read through those letters. Over.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. One of the concerns, and a couple of people asked this actually, can a CO write-up be too long? The board members only have so much time. Is there such a thing as too long of a CO recommendation, or is it just that, highlight the key points as both of you mentioned?
I'll take a stab at that first.
Okay, sir.
So you have to put it in context and understand that of course you don't want to send a dissertation, and I always like to keep my letters to one page. Typically when if you have something you really want to focus on, then it's okay to go over a page, or hey, if the signature line goes over to the next page, then of course you want to drop down the next paragraph to the second page with it. But I think being concise and to the point, it will be very beneficial, because sometimes you can say too much and really not say anything at all, if that makes sense. So it's not actually the amount of words, but it's actually the impact that the statements have, and you want things that are going to resonate with the board. And that's why I went back to talking about, hey, what is the mission statement for Navy medicine? What are those people, platform, those things that the Surgeon General is focused on when he goes out and he's meeting the sailors, he's meeting with the officers. So those are the things that are really going to resonate without it being a dissertation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I guess you also don't need to have in your letter of recommendation, like, recant everyone's whole service record, because they have their whole service record. So the letter should be speaking to their potential to be a successful officer. So the things that you're talking about in the letter should be examples of why the CO believes that this person is going to be a successful officer. And that goes back to, leadership, support to the mission, understanding where Navy medicine falls in support to the, line of Marine Corps forces and those types of things.
I thank you for bringing that up, sir, ma'am, because reviewing packages now that I'm on this side, I see a lot of that repetition and almost copy and paste of evaluations in the CO recommendations. So thank you for bringing up that it shouldn't be a recant of every single thing. So appreciate that. So that's the questions about the CO recommendation draft per se. I kind of want to move more towards some etiquette stuff that people are concerned about. So this is a very basic question, but people asked it is, how should they show up when they go to the COs for a CO interview if a CO decides to do one? Dress blues, NSUs, uniform the day. What is an appropriate way to move forward with an interview with a commanding officer?
I'll go take a stab at it. So I have typically, I have senior enlisted or other officers. They ask me the preference. So my recommendation is, I think the sailors or Marines or whoever's doing the interview, whoever's been interviewed, they should be in their dress uniform. So I think for that gives, and I learned this from Master Chief, and Master Chiefs before me. that gives an opportunity that you get to see the military bearing. You get to see, one thing you get to see is, hey, what do they have on their chest? What type of things have they done? Besides what's in the record too, but really, it shows a lot about how they carry themselves. Because one of the things you have to remember when you become an officer, a lot of people are looking at you. They're looking at you as an example, but they're also looking at you at that level, or what type of flaws that you have. That's where leadership 101 starts.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would just think of it like if you're applying for a job, because that's what they're doing, right? You're applying, you're in the Navy, but you're applying for a new job. And so how would you apply for a job? Would you show up in just your street clothes, or would you be, dressed for success? And so I would say err on the side of dressing for success and make that impression that, you really are a professional sailor, you understand etiquette, and you showed up prepared and ready to, speak to your commanding officer about your future, officer employment, if you will.
Correct. And those uniforms are not easy to manage and handle. So when you come in pristine, it does really say a lot about yourself, especially those whites. So when you come in pristine, that says a lot about your character. So thank you for that, sir, ma'am. Another question that is asked is it appropriate to do a pre-meeting to the actual interview? I guess the question of the specific service member, what if I want to find out the expectations of the CO? How should I go about that? Is it going to be a sit-down interview, the uniform, or how do they go about asking to prepare for this CO without asking the CO directly? What's the appropriate way to go about that?
I would say when I was an XO, those were conversations I had with people. You don't need to take up the CO's time with 2 interviews for the same interview. I mean, there's people that should, either it's the master chief should be able to give you that, the senior enlisted should be able to, sit down with the sailors and give them that information, or the XO should be able to sit down and say, hey, they will have done enough of these, probably. If it's not for IPP, it's some other officer program or something else that needs an interview, that they know what their CO likes and can prepare them. So you don't need to get on the CO's, in my opinion, you don't necessarily need to get on the CO's calendar twice to figure out how the CO, what you need to do to prepare and what the expectations are for you at that meeting. That's what the CO's other leadership team can do for him or her. That's how I viewed it when I was an XO. But command teams are different, so maybe, don't take that as gospel, but I think that's probably between the command master chief and the XO, those are at least good places to start before you just go directly to trying to schedule another meeting with the commanding officer.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sir,
hey, Lieutenant Brady, I'm having some technical difficulties. I'm having a hard time hearing you. Commander Score, can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes, sir. Can you hear me right now, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. No, the question that was asked, sir, is it appropriate to basically schedule a meeting prior to the meeting with the CEO to get an expectation and find out what should I wear or how should I go about it? What's my CEO's expectation? Should they go directly to the CEO, or are there other avenues? And Commander Scory just addressed that as the XO, she will take that on and kind of discuss that.
Right. Yeah.
Also the CMC
Yes.
for that one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I said there was no need for 2 meetings with the CO. There's other people in the command team that can prep them.
Yeah. Commander Score, you coming in loud and clear. I'm just having a hard time hearing Lieutenant Brady. But yeah, I definitely concur with that. So it's also going to depend on relationship, because they're going to be people that you ask to do your letter of recommendation, or that you ask to do your interview, that you have a lot closer relationship with. And I think that will play a pivotal role in whether you need to have a meeting before. But typically you're going to get that information, through officers that are mentoring you, or from the command master chief, or from the chief's mess as well. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities, there are plenty of people to guide you in understanding how to approach particular COs. Because I don't want to just always, I can give you my opinion, but I think, each situation is going to be unique based on that particular CO or that command team, that triad, the XO as well.
Yes, sir. Perfect. Thank you so much, sir, ma'am. Three more questions, two pertaining specifically for the actual board process. One of the questions is, have there been any CO recommendations that could potentially be deal breakers in and the actual board?
Well, so every board is different. And I think CO's recommendation, CO's endorsement weighs in heavily. But also, too, people have to understand that they look at the whole record. You know, it's just not one, it's just not the letter recommendation, it's not the appraisal form. It's also, you know, what does your ESR say? What is your performance? What do your evals say? So it is the entire record, as well as your grades, your SAT scores or ACT score, you know, whatever test you're taking, all of those things are factored in as well. So don't just pinpoint on one thing and thinking that, hey, I didn't get a strong endorsement from a CO, but I also look at the whole record. So just be mindful of that.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, anything yet to add to that, ma'am?
I have not sat on an IPP board, so I would defer to Captain Boyce on that. But I think that that's probably true of all boards, that the Navy looks at the whole person, not, you can't have like substandard evals and then get a great recommendation from your CO and think that's gonna overtake your substandard performance over a period of time. So I think you're always, I mean, it's probably just good advice in general that the Navy is all about the whole person, not just one point in time.
Correct. Thank you, sir, ma'am. Yeah, and that, I think that kind of answers the other question too, is the ranking portion. When the COs rank individual members, 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4. I know I personally got selected with not the #1 ranking, but you both mentioned the overall concept of a sailor, and that's not just the CO recommendation; it's also your evals and the appraisals and all different aspects. So thank you for that. Last question, and both of you came from a Marine Corps platform. We have a lot of service members applying, and they have COs that are battalion commanders. That's an 05 equivalent in Navy. And what would be your suggestion to these individuals that don't have a Navy CO or not too familiar with the Medical Service Corps or the MSC IPP? How do they go about in kind of addressing that with that specific CO of their command so that they can increase their chances of having good CO recommendations or having a strong CO recommendation?
Well, I think one way to approach that is whoever they have as a mentor, whether it's officer, just have them reach out to someone. Typically, there's going to be someone in the area where there's a senior MSC that can potentially give some guidance for that Marine Corps CO. But it also goes back to what I was talking about earlier. You know, I'm really on the Marine Corps side. I have not. Most of the endorsements are about the same, whether you're coming from a Marine Corps command or you know, lieutenant colonel, or captain or commander. They're pretty standard. You know, performance is performance. But you know, feel free to reach out to some senior MSCs that can reach out potentially to those COs and kind of, you know, can't make them do anything, but we can suggest, hey, you know, got a hard charger here. You know, we'd like to, you know, if you have any questions, you know, give us a call. You know, because we've been doing these letters of recommendation. Here's what they need for them to be successful.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, anything to add to that, ma'am?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most Marine commanders, like Captain Boyd said, they might not be writing letters of recommendation as many for IPP, but they're I'm sure writing a lot of letters of recommendation for other things that Marines are, other officer programs that Marines are doing, or other things that Marines are applying for. So, you know, they'll be well versed in how to write a letter of recommendation. And I don't think there's anything specific in an IPP letter that's so special. Like we talked about earlier, you're talking about the potential of this person to be an officer, and you know, that's primarily leadership, the ability to accomplish the mission. And certainly if anybody can speak to that, I would think a Marine Corps officer could pick out. I mean, it might be harder because they are much more driven on the leadership front and the mission accomplishment front than sometimes different areas of Navy medicine are. So it might be the standard for them might be a little bit higher than maybe someone else, but who knows? It's hard to know. But I don't think that just because they're a Marine, they should be more than qualified as an 05 or an 06 Marine Corps officer to write a letter of recommendation for any officer program.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir, ma'am. That wraps up our questions, and I would just like to ask, before we end this interview session with Zoom, any parting words to the aspiring future Medical Service Corps officers that are trying to apply for the MSC IPP program? Ma'am, can I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say it's super competitive, but don't let that deter you. Don't let it, if you don't get selected the first time, don't let that deter you. If this is something you're passionate about and you want to continue to serve in the Navy in the capacity of being an officer, continue to strive, and that will continue. That means you have to continue to be a superior performer. So you can't let up. You can't, if you don't get selected one year, you can't let up and say, I'm just going to kind of give up. No, you need to put your foot to the gas harder and get some more stuff under your belt, some more experience, some more leadership. It's just a competitive time, and I think if it's what you want to do, you just need to keep working hard. And they're hard decisions, but you're doing your best and keep striving. Eventually, you'll succeed. That's what I think.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, definitely concur with that. Don't give up. Set goals. Set realistic goals, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Have people look at your package. But end of the day, you still, no matter what role you're in, you have to perform. End of the day, whether it's promotion, whether it's selection for IPP, sustained superior performance is what's gonna get you across the finish line. And just remember, there's plenty of MSC officers that are out here willing to support you. And don't be afraid to ask. I mean, that's what we're here for. Our job is to build the future of our Navy. I'm long in tooth, and as Lieutenant Abreu said earlier, I'm approaching 26 years actually in January. So
that's right.
I've got maybe one more tour left, and but our job, me and Commander Scory, is to identify those future leaders that I talked about all the time when I was at Second Med. Hey, I'm trying to prepare people to sit in my seat one day. Because a lot of us, throughout our career, we've been at those areas where we've needed people to encourage us, we've needed people to help us, reach those milestones we wanted in our career. And I would not be where I am today if it hadn't been for great senior enlisted, great officers, great commanding officers, and just mentors across the board. So don't give up, work hard, and hope to see you pin on that oak leaf one day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir, ma'am. Thank you so much. I know both of you are very busy individuals, so I'm pretty sure all our sailors that tuned in today greatly appreciate your time and effort as well. Thank you for the great wisdom and the knowledge, and hopefully we get to work again one day before both of you retire. But I appreciate your knowledge. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.
Right.
Bye.